Wade Morrison had survived a burning tank in the Gulf, a bullet through the shoulder in Fallujah, and 23 years leading a motorcycle club through territory wars. He did not expect to die in a roadside diner over a cup of coffee. But at 9:29 a.m. on a Thursday in October, three men walked through the door with murder in their eyes, and Wade knew his luck had finally run out. The coffee pot shook in Sarah Mitchell's hand as she watched them settle into booth 9. Something was wrong. 4 years working the Crossroads Diner had taught her to read people the way mechanics read engine trouble, and these three men radiated danger like heat off asphalt in August. No club patches on their leather jackets. That was the first warning sign. In this stretch of Arizona where Route 66 crossed County Road 12, bikers wore their colors like uniforms. Riding without patches meant hiding something. Hiding identity. Hiding intent. The oldest one had a scorpion tattooed on his neck, prison ink, with the telltale blur of cheap needles and darker intentions. His eyes swept the diner with the calculating precision of someone mapping exits and angles of fire. The young one couldn't stop his leg from bouncing nervous energy, crackling off him like static electricity. His phone never left his hand, checking messages with the frequency of someone waiting for orders. The third man, gray-bearded and stone-faced, possessed an absolute stillness that frightened Sarah more than the other's obvious tension. Predators went still before they struck. Sarah approached their booth with practiced efficiency, coffee pot raised in silent offering. The scorpion-necked man waved her off without looking at her, his attention fixed on the parking lot beyond the plate glass windows. The young one ordered coffee in a voice that cracked slightly, betraying his nerves despite the hard set of his jaw. The graybeard said nothing, just tapped his fork against the Formica tabletop in a rhythm that set Sarah's teeth on edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like a countdown. She retreated to the counter where Jake worked the grill, his weathered hands moving through the choreography of eggs and hash browns with the muscle memory of 3 decades. Vietnam had taught Jake to notice things too. The slight hunch of his shoulders told Sarah he'd clocked the three men as threats before they'd taken their seats. The morning rush had thinned to the usual Thursday regulars. Martha sat in her corner booth working a crossword, silver hair, catching the autumn sunlight streaming through the east windows. 2 truckers occupied the counter stools discussing routes and weather with the easy camaraderie of men who'd logged 1,000,000 miles on America's highways. A family with 2 small children laughed over pancakes in booth 3, the youngest painting syrup patterns on his plate with fierce concentration. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that violence was coiling itself into a spring in the corner of the room. Sarah refilled Martha's coffee and cleared plates from booth 5, her circuit bringing her close to the 3 men. Their voices dropped to whispers, but sound carried strangely in the diner's acoustic dead spots. She caught fragments, pieces of a conversation that turned her blood to ice water. The moment he orders black coffee, no sugar, we move. The scorpion-necked man leaned forward, elbows on the table, intensity radiating from every line of his body. That's the signal. Colt always orders the same thing. The second he says it, we finish this. Sarah's hand froze halfway to clearing a water glass. Colt. She knew exactly one person who went by that name, and he'd be walking through that door in exactly 3 minutes if he kept to his schedule the way he always did. Wade Morrison, Iron Wolves president. The man who'd helped Martha carry groceries to her car last month when her arthritis flared. The man who'd jump-started Sarah's dead battery without being asked, without expecting anything in return. The man who left $20 tips on $8 breakfast tabs because he knew Sarah was sending money home to Phoenix for her mother's cancer treatment. The rumble of approaching motorcycles vibrated through the diner's foundation. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as 5 Harleys rolled into the parking lot, their riders wearing the Iron Wolves colors she'd come to recognize, black leather backing with a snarling wolf's head over crossed bones. The bikes arranged themselves with military precision, their formation suggesting order and discipline rather than the chaotic arrival of men who just happened to be riding together. 4 men dismounted and took positions that seemed casual until Sarah noticed they'd positioned themselves to cover both entrances and maintain clear sight lines across the parking lot. The 5th rider, was the one who'd been leading the formation, swung off his bike with the careful economy of movement that spoke to old injuries healed but not forgotten. Wade Morrison, Colt, 52 years old, silver threading through the dark beard he kept trimmed close to his jaw, Purple Heart pin on his leather vest catching the morning sun. His eyes swept the parking lot once before he headed for the door, those eyes that seemed to catalog and assess everything they touched. Sarah glanced at booth 9. The scorpion-necked man's hand had disappeared beneath his jacket. The young one's leg stopped bouncing, sudden stillness more alarming than the nervous energy. The graybeard's fork went silent against the tabletop. 3 men coiled tight, waiting for their moment. The door opened with the familiar jangle of the bell above the frame. Colt stepped through, bringing with him the scent of leather, an October morning, and motorcycle exhaust. He touched 2 fingers to his forehead in a casual salute toward Martha, who smiled and waved her pen at him. The 2 truckers nodded acknowledgement, the kind of respectful greeting men gave to someone they recognized as worth respecting. The family with the pancake painting children glanced up briefly before returning to their breakfast, untroubled by the presence of a man whose reputation preceded him by several counties in every direction. Colt settled onto his usual stool at the counter third from the left, positioning himself where he could watch both the door and the parking lot through the windows. Old habits from old wars never quite died. The man beside him, the one who dismounted second and followed Colt inside, took the stool to his right. James Reynolds, Ghost, vice president of the Iron Wolves, and according to local knowledge, Colt's best friend since before most people in the diner had been born. The prosthetic fingers on his right hand were obvious in the morning light, 3 fingers replaced from the second knuckle with titanium and silicone that moved with unsettling precision. The hearing aid in his left ear was less obvious, but Sarah had noticed it during previous visits, the small device nearly invisible against his salt and pepper hair. Colt reached for the laminated menu card that stood between the napkin dispenser and the salt shaker, a gesture so habitual it bordered on ritual. Sarah knew he wouldn't actually read it. In 6 months of Thursday morning visits, he'd never once deviated from his order. Black coffee, no sugar, 2 eggs over easy. Toast wheat dry. The consistency had been charming at first, then endearing, and now it was about to get him killed. Sarah moved before conscious thought caught up with instinct. Her hand closed around the coffee pot, her feet carrying her toward the counter, with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd walked these same steps 10,000 times. To anyone watching, she was simply doing her job, refilling coffee, taking an order, being the invisible service worker that most customers never really saw. But Sarah saw everything. The way the scorpion-necked man's shoulders tensed, the way the young one's hand drifted toward his jacket, the way the graybeard's cold eyes tracked Colt's every movement with the focused intensity of a sniper acquiring a target. 10 seconds, maybe less. That's how long she had before Colt spoke the words that would trigger the trap. She reached his stool, coffee pot tilted in offering. Colt glanced up at her, and for one crystalline moment their eyes met. His were darker than she'd expected up close, brown like creek water, over stones carrying depths she hadn't noticed from across the diner. Intelligence lived in those eyes, and something else. Sadness, maybe. The kind of old grief that never quite healed, just settled into the bones and became part of the architecture of a person's soul. The menu card lay forgotten under his hand. His lips parted, the first syllable of his order forming. Sarah leaned forward, bringing her face close to his ear, the movement hidden by the angle of her body and the coffee pot she held between them and booth 9's sightline. Her lips barely moved, the words more breath than sound, intimate and urgent and desperate. Don't speak. They're here to kill you. Colt went absolutely still, not frozen, but controlled the sudden immobility of a soldier who just realized he was standing in a minefield. His hand on the counter didn't move, but Sarah saw his pupils dilate, saw the muscles in his jaw flex, once saw his eyes cut sideways toward booth 9 without moving his head. 3 seconds of absolute silence stretched like pulled wire. Then Colt's hand came up in a casual gesture, 2 fingers tapping once against the counter before dropping again. Ghost, who'd been perusing his own menu, went rigid. Whatever signal Colt had just given Ghost understood it perfectly. The easy warmth drained from Ghost's expression, replaced by a cold alertness that transformed him from friendly middle-aged biker to something far more dangerous. Colt shifted on his stool, the movement appearing relaxed and unhurried to anyone who wasn't reading the sudden tension in his shoulders. His voice came out easy, conversational, completely at odds with the predatory focus that had taken over his eyes. You know what, I'm not that hungry after all. Just the coffee for now. Sarah poured with hands that wanted to shake but somehow stayed steady. Steam rose from the cup, carrying the rich, bitter smell of dark roast. Colt wrapped his fingers around the ceramic, lifted it slightly, in what might have been thanks or acknowledgement, or something else entirely. Ghost stood the movement smooth and casual, and walked toward the restroom. His path took him past Booth 9 close enough that he could have reached out and touched the scorpion-necked man's shoulder, close enough to count threats and assess weapons and measure reaction time. He didn't look directly at the three men, but Sarah saw his eyes track them in peripheral vision, saw the way his prosthetic hand flexed once as he passed. At Booth 9, confusion rippled through the three men like wind through grass. The scorpion-necked man's eyes narrowed, darting between Colt and his phone and back again. The young one's legs started bouncing again, the nervous energy back and amplified. The graybeard's expression didn't change at all, but his fork resumed its rhythmic tapping. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, counting down to something, though what and when remained unclear. Colt sipped his coffee, the picture of a man with nothing more pressing on his mind than caffeine in the morning sun. But Sarah saw his eyes moving, tracking Ghost's path, marking the positions of the other Iron Wolves members, outside cataloging the three men in Booth 9, and the civilians scattered through the diner who'd find themselves in a crossfire if bullets started flying. Martha laughed at something in her crossword puzzle, completely oblivious to the tension, singing through the room like a wire pulled too tight. The family's younger child knocked over his orange juice, and his mother dabbed at the spreading puddle with napkins, while the father flagged Sarah for a refill. Normal life continued around them while two groups of dangerous men sized each other up and calculated odds and waited for someone to make the first move. Ghost returned from the restroom, pausing beside Colt's stool. His voice pitched low enough that Sarah barely caught it, though she stood close enough to count the scars on Colt's knuckles. 3. Booth 9, armed. The one with the scorpion ink is familiar. Can't place him yet. Colt's jaw tightened fractionally. He took another sip of coffee, his eyes distant, like he was looking through the diner walls to somewhere else entirely. Somewhere in memory, maybe. Somewhere that hurt. We're leaving. Now, get the boys. Ghost's prosthetic hand moved in a gesture too quick and subtle for Sarah to catch. But through the window, she saw the four Iron Wolves members outside, suddenly alert, mounting their bikes with synchronized precision. No rush, no panic, just smooth, efficient movement that suggested extensive practice. Colt stood, leaving a $20 bill beside his untouched coffee. He turned towards Sarah, and the weight of his attention felt like standing in front of headlights. His voice stayed low, meant only for her. You just saved my life. That means something. I'll be back. Then he was moving toward the door, Ghost beside him, the two men moving with the coordinated grace of partners who'd walked into and out of danger together so many times it had become choreographed. The door opened, closed. Engines roared to life. 5 motorcycles pulled out of the parking lot in formation heading east on Route 66, leaving nothing behind but exhaust fumes and the ghost of violence that had almost happened. At Booth 9, the scorpion-necked man was already on his phone, his voice harsh and furious, though Sarah couldn't make out words over the ringing in her ears and the hammer of her heartbeat. The young one looked sick, face pale and shining with sweat. The graybeard's expression remained unchanged, but he was looking at Sarah now, really looking at her, his cold eyes measuring and memorizing. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the stool Colt had vacated, still warm from his body heat. The coffee pot dangled from her nerveless fingers, liquid sloshing against the glass. Jake appeared at her elbow, his hand on her shoulder, his voice cutting through the static in her head. Sarah, look at me. What just happened? She couldn't answer, couldn't form words, could only stare at Booth 9 where 3 men were standing, dropping cash on the table heading for the door. The scorpion-necked man's eyes found hers as he passed, and he smiled. Not frustrated, not angry, pleased. Like she'd done exactly what he'd wanted her to do. Like she'd just made a terrible mistake without knowing it. The door jangled shut behind them. Through the window, Sarah watched a black Ford F-150 pull out of the parking lot, heading the opposite direction from the motorcycles. The young one was driving, the scorpion-necked man in the passenger seat with his phone pressed to his ear, the graybeard in the back with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes closed like he was praying or sleeping or calculating his next move. Jake's hand tightened on Sarah's shoulder. Kid, talk to me. What happened? Sarah finally found her voice, though it came out thin and distant like it belonged to someone else. I think I just stopped a murder. I think I just made enemies. I don't know how to fight. I think I just changed everything." Jake was quiet for a long moment, his eyes tracking the departing truck. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old experience, old wars, old choices that had seemed right at the time and haunted him later. "Then you'd better hope Wade Morrison is as honorable as people say. Because you're in his world now, whether you meant to be or not. To understand why Wade Morrison would risk everything for a waitress who saved his life, you need to understand the day he failed to save the person who mattered most. March 15th, 2 years earlier, the night Rebecca died. The conference room at the Iron Wolves compound smelled like stale coffee and cigarette smoke and the particular tension that came from grown men trying to solve problems that had no good solutions. Territory disputes never resolved themselves cleanly. The Desert Phantoms wanted access to Iron Wolves' northern routes for their legitimate transport business, a reasonable request complicated by the fact that Nevada Vipers also wanted those routes for considerably less legitimate purposes. Threading the needle between the two rival clubs' competing interests while maintaining Iron Wolves' neutrality required diplomacy, patience, and hour after hour of negotiation that felt like trying to defuse a bomb while wearing oven mitts. Colt sat at the head of the scarred oak table, Ghost to his right, other senior members arranged around the perimeter. Maps lay spread across the surface marked with highlighter and grease pencil, routes and territories, and overlap zones that needed careful navigation. The conversation had been going in circles for 90 minutes, everyone too proud or too paranoid to give ground, and Colt could feel a headache building behind his eyes. His phone buzzed. Rebecca, his daughter, his entire world, his reason for building something worth defending instead of just collecting grievances and enemies like so many men in this life did. He glanced at the screen. Text message, not a call. That meant it wasn't urgent. Probably asking for money or permission to stay over at a friend's house or some other routine teenage request that could wait 20 minutes. The phone buzzed again. Another text. Colt's thumb hovered over the screen, ready to open it, but Ghost was talking about routes through Sedona, and Marcus Thompson was arguing about liability, and someone else was asking about insurance coverage, and the moment slip had passed. "I'll call her back," Colt thought. 20 minutes. "Meeting's almost done. She can wait 20 minutes. He put the phone face down on the table and returned his attention to the maps and the arguments and the careful balancing act that kept violence from erupting between clubs who all thought they had righteous claims to the same stretches of Arizona highway. 18 minutes later, an unknown number lit up his phone screen. Colt almost didn't answer, but something about the timing made his stomach clench. He stepped into the hallway, the clubhouse's dim corridor lit by overhead fluorescence that hummed with cheap electricity. "Mr. Morrison, this is Officer Chen with Scottsdale Police. There's been an accident involving your daughter, Rebecca Morrison. We need you to come to Scottsdale Medical Center immediately." The drive took 43 minutes that felt like hours and seconds simultaneously, time stretching and compressing until Colt couldn't tell if he'd been driving for days or if he'd teleported directly from the compound to the hospital parking lot. Ghost drove because Colt's hands were shaking too badly to hold the wheel steady, his vision tunneling down to pinpoint focus on the road ahead, while everything else blurred into irrelevance. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and blood and desperation. A doctor met them in the corridor, her scrubs marked with stains that might have been coffee or might have been something darker. Her words came through underwater, distorted and distant. Severe trauma, head-on collision, drunk driver crossed the center line, passenger side impact. We're doing everything we can. They let him see her. That was when Colt knew how bad it really was, because they only let family in when there was no hope left and what remained was saying goodbye. Rebecca lay on the gurney machines, breathing for her, tubes and wires connecting her body to equipment that beeped and hummed and measured the failing systems that had carried his daughter through 17 years of life. Her face was bruised, swollen wrong, but her eyes opened when he took her hand, and for just a moment, she was there, really there, looking at him with consciousness and recognition in something that might have been accusation. Her lips moved. The ventilator tube made speech impossible, but Colt had been reading his daughter's expressions since before she could walk. He knew what she was asking. "Where were you?" I called. "Why didn't you come?" The machines started screaming. Nurses rushed in, the doctor barking orders, everyone moving with choreographed urgency that Colt recognized from other emergencies, other moments when life hung by threads that were already fraying. They pushed him back out of the room into the hallway where Ghost caught him and held him upright while Colt's legs forgot how to work. Team of Death, 7 a.m. The doctor's voice flat and professional and already moving past this tragedy to the next one waiting in another room. I'm sorry for your loss. The funeral happened 3 days later. Julia Colt's ex-wife stood on the opposite side of the grave, her face a mask of grief and rage directed squarely at him. Rebecca's friends clustered in small groups, teenagers trying to process mortality, some crying, some blank-faced and shocked. Iron Wolves members lined up behind Colt, a wall of leather and loyalty that couldn't protect him from the one enemy that mattered, his own failure. Julia waited until the minister finished, until the first handful of dirt hit the coffin, until most of the mourners had drifted away toward their cars. Then she crossed to where Colt stood, still staring at the hole in the ground that held everything that mattered. She called you. Did you know that? She texted twice, then called. The party got weird, she said. Some boy brought vodka and people were drinking, and she felt uncomfortable, and she wanted her dad to come get her. Colt's throat closed. He'd check the phone later after the hospital, after the machines went silent. 2 texts at 11:47 p.m., 1 call at 11:52 p.m. He'd been in that meeting arguing about territory and routes and meaningless bullshit while his daughter stood in a stranger's driveway waiting for rescue that never came. But you were busy, Julia continued, her voice acid and ashes. Club business, always club business. So she got a ride with someone else, someone who'd been drinking, someone who crossed the center line doing 70 and killed our daughter because you couldn't be bothered to answer your phone. The words hit like bullets. Clean and devastating and absolutely accurate. Colt had no defense, no excuse, no way to argue with the simple truth that he'd failed the one person who'd needed him most. Julia's face crumpled, rage collapsing into grief that bent her double. Ghost stepped forward, supporting her, guiding her away toward her car, and her new husband, who stood at a respectful distance, giving them space for this final reckoning. Colt remained at the graveside until the cemetery workers finished filling in the dirt, until the temporary marker was placed, until the sun dropped below the horizon, and cold desert nights settled over the headstones. Ghost stayed with him, silent and solid, the kind of presence that didn't try to fix anything or offer empty comfort, just witnessed the breaking and held the pieces. Finally, as stars emerged overhead and temperature dropped toward freezing, Colt spoke. I'm going to do better. I'm going to be better. Next time someone needs help, I'll be there. I'll answer. I won't fail again. Ghost's prosthetic hand settled on Colt's shoulder. Rebecca wouldn't want you carrying this forever, brother. Colt shook his head, slow and certain. This is mine to carry. Forever. That's the price. That's what I owe. 3 months after Rebecca's funeral, Julia finalized the divorce and moved to California with her new husband. The house Colt had shared with his family for 16 years sold to strangers who painted over Rebecca's room and tore out the garden where she'd grown tomatoes. Colt moved permanently into his quarters at the compound, converting Rebecca's bedroom furniture into a meditation space he rarely used except for those nights when sleep wouldn't come and memories wouldn't quiet. He planted a garden behind the clubhouse, working the soil with his hands, growing vegetables he distributed to club members' families. Therapy doc called it recognizing PTSD when he saw it. Penance, Colt thought, though he never said it aloud. Growing things, nurturing life, trying to balance the scales. The promise he'd made at graveside became his operating code. When Martha needed help with groceries, Colt was there. When Sarah's car battery died, Colt was there. When anyone in his territory needed assistance or protection or just someone to show up and prove they weren't alone, Colt was there. Always. Without fail. Without hesitation. Because he'd failed once, and that failure had cost him everything that mattered, and he would not make that mistake again. Ghost understood, because Ghost remembered. February 1991, Desert Storm. Iraq's highway of death, except they'd been on the living side of that particular apocalypse, rolling through Kuwait in M1 Abrams tanks that made them feel invincible, right up until the moment fire proved they weren't. The ambush came at dawn. Iraqi forces dug into positions that American intelligence had sworn were abandoned. RPGs materialized from the smoke and sand, one of them finding Ghost's tank with the kind of precision that suggested either incredible luck or divine malice. The explosion tore through armor that was supposed to be impenetrable, turned steel into shrapnel, set fuel and ammunition cooking off in secondary blasts that transformed the tank into a crematorium on treads. Ghost crew bailed 3 men stumbling clear of the inferno. But Ghost's harness jammed damaged metal, refusing to release flames spreading across the hull toward the commander's position. Colt saw it from his own tank, saw Ghost struggling, saw death approaching, with the methodical certainty of fire-consuming oxygen. Standing orders were clear. Don't leave your vehicle during contact. Don't expose yourself to enemy fire. Let the burning tank's crew handle their own emergency. Commanders who played hero got killed and dead commanders couldn't lead their surviving crews. Colt left his tank anyway. He ran through gunfire that chewed up sand around his boots, reached Ghost's vehicle just as flames found the ammunition. Storage pulled his friend clear, with seconds to spare before the tank's magazine detonated in a blast that should have killed them both. Shrapnel caught Ghost's right hand, tore through tissue, and bone destroyed fingers that would eventually be replaced with titanium and silicone. Concussive force ruptured Ghost's eardrum damage that would lead to partial deafness and a hearing aid worn for the next 33 years. But Ghost lived. They both lived. Colt dragged his friend 200 yards to cover the two of them collapsing behind a burned-out Iraqi position while their crews laid down suppressing fire and American aircraft turned the ambush positions into smoking craters. In the field hospital later, morphine making everything soft around the edges. Ghost gripped Colt's wrist with his undamaged hand. "I owe you everything. My life, everything." Colt shook his head. "You'd have done the same for me." Ghost's eyes serious and clear despite the drugs held his. "Yeah, I would. That's what brothers do. We save each other. Remember that. When you need saving, I'll be there. That's the debt. That's what we owe." 33 years later, that debt remained unpaid because Colt had never needed saving. He'd built the Iron Wolves into something stable and strong, led them through territory disputes and economic downturns, and the slow erosion of the old ways as clubs went legitimate or fell apart. He'd survived everything the world threw at him except his own failure to answer his daughter's phone call. Until this morning. Until a waitress he barely knew whispered a warning that stopped 3 bullets before they could fly. Until Ghost finally got his chance to repay a debt 3 decades old. The ride back to the compound took 20 minutes, 5 motorcycles moving at exactly the speed limit, nothing obvious enough to draw police attention. They pulled through the gates and parked in formation, engines cutting off in sequence, sudden silence loud after the sustained roar. Colt dismounted, every instinct screaming at him to turn around and ride back to the diner to make sure Sarah was safe to finish what had started. But tactical sense overrode instinct. He needed intelligence first. Needed to understand who tried to kill him and why, and whether this was an isolated attempt or the opening move in something larger. The clubhouse looked exactly as it always did, brick and steel, and security cameras covering every approach, garden out back growing toward autumn harvest, the sign for Morrison's Custom Auto Repair, visible on the adjacent building where Iron Wolf's legitimate business kept them financially stable. Home. Sanctuary. The fortress he'd built to protect the people who rode under his colors. Ghost followed him into the conference room, the same space where Colt had sat ignoring Rebecca's call 2 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd been in this room making decisions about club business when his daughter needed him. Now he was back here because someone had tried to kill him over club business and a stranger had paid the price of involvement. Bull Thompson appeared in the doorway, road captain and de facto logistics expert, his bulk filling the frame. Behind him came Ace Briggs, moving carefully on knees that 30 years of riding had worn down to bone grinding on bone, his cane tapping rhythmic counterpoint to his footsteps. Doc Martinez trailed last medical bag, perpetually slung over his shoulder, eyes holding the 1,000-yard stare that never quite faded no matter how many years passed since Iraq. "Emergency church," Colt said. "Full patch only, now." The men dispersed to gather the others. Iron Wolf's charter included 23 patch members, but only the senior leadership needed to know the details of this particular crisis. 6 men assembled around the conference table within 10 minutes, Colt at the head, Ghost to his right, Bull and Ace on his left, Doc at the far end, and Ray Morrison Clutch in the remaining chair. Clutch was Colt's half-brother, same father but different mothers, 15 years separating their births. Their father had founded Iron Wolves in 1978, building it from 3 bikes and a dream into a legitimate motorcycle club with businesses and properties and genuine respect. When he died in 2010, leadership should have been contested. Clutch had lobbied for joint presidency, arguing that family mattered more than seniority. But the membership voted for Colt by a margin that wasn't even close, and Clutch had been sergeant-at-arms ever since, handling security and discipline and weapons inventory with brutal efficiency. The resentment had been building for 14 years. Colt saw it in his brother's eyes every time authority got exercised, every time respect flowed toward the president's chair instead of the SAA's position. Clutch wanted the patch, wanted the power, wanted the recognition their father had given to Colt instead of dividing equally between sons. But family was family. Brotherhood meant something. So Colt kept trying to bridge the gap, while Clutch kept widening it, and they both pretended not to notice the slow fracture spreading through their relationship. Colt waited until everyone was seated, until the door closed, until silence settled, heavy enough to carry the weight of what he needed to say. Someone tried to kill me this morning, at Crossroads Diner. 3 men, armed, waiting for me to order coffee so they could use my routine as their signal. They knew my Thursday morning schedule. They knew where I'd be when I'd be there, exactly what I'd order. That information didn't come from surveillance. Ghost leaned forward, prosthetic fingers drumming on the table. Inside job. Has to be. Your Thursday run isn't posted anywhere. It's not on social media. It's just something you do and only we know about it. Clutch's face darkened. You're assuming a rat based on what could be coincidence. Could be someone noticed the pattern over time. Bull shook his head. 3 months surveillance to learn a coffee order. Nobody invests that kind of time for a single hit. Someone told them. Question is who? Colt pulled out his phone, opened, voice recording, set it on the table. Before we get into witch hunts, let's focus on what we know, Ghost. You said the one with the scorpion tattoo looked familiar. Ghost nodded slowly, his eyes distant with the effort of reaching back through memory. Yeah, took me the whole ride to place him. Marcus Kane used to be ours, sergeant-at-arms before Clutch took over. You kicked him out about 18 months ago after he put a civilian in the hospital. The name hit Colt like cold water. Viper. That's what they'd called him. Him, the scorpion neck tattoo, earning him a call sign that fit his personality, patient venomous. Willing to wait as long as necessary before striking. He'd been a good SAA, brutal when necessary, but disciplined. Until the night in Flagstaff when a drunk college kid made the mistake of bumping into Viper at a bar, spilling his drink, laughing about it. Viper had beaten the kid so badly he'd spent 2 weeks in ICU, permanent vision damage, in one eye, reconstructive surgery on his jaw. The kid's only crime was clumsiness and youth and being in the wrong place when Viper's temper finally slipped its leash. Iron Wolves had a code. No harming civilians without cause. No excessive force against people who couldn't fight back. No using club colors as excuse for personal violence. Viper had broken all 3 rules in full view of witnesses, and the club had voted 9-1 to revoke his patch. Only Clutch had argued for leniency, claiming loyalty mattered more than one mistake. Colt remembered Viper's face when the vote came down. Not remorse, not shame. Pure rage aimed directly at the president, who'd enforce consequences for actions that Viper thought should be overlooked. You'll regret this, Viper had said, stripping off his colors and throwing them on the conference table. I gave you 15 years, best years of my life. You're throwing me away for some random asshole who couldn't watch where he was going. Colt had stayed calm, kept his voice level. The code isn't optional. You crossed the line. This is the price. Viper's smile had been all scorpion, all venom. We'll see about prices. We'll see who pays what. 18 months of silence. 18 months of waiting for retaliation that never came. Until this morning. So Viper held a grudge, Ace said. Shocker. But where's he getting resources for a hit? Last I heard, he was washing out no club affiliation, no prospects. Ghost's expression went dark. I made some calls on the ride back. Viper's riding with Nevada Vipers now. Alejandro Vargas's crew. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Nevada Vipers were everything Iron Wolves wasn't: violent mercenary involved in drug trade and human trafficking, controlled territory through intimidation and execution. Alejandro Vargas, known as El Diablo, for reasons that had nothing to do with theology and everything to do with his approach to competition, ran Nevada Vipers like a cartel. Efficient, ruthless, willing to do anything that advanced his territory and power. If Viper had allied with Diablo, Then this morning's attempt wasn't personal revenge. It was the opening move in a territorial war. Clutch leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So what's the play? We can't hide. Can't run. Diablo wants our territory. He'll keep coming until he gets it, or we stop him. Colt studied his brother's face, looking for tells for any sign that Clutch knew more than he should. But Clutch's expression remained carefully neutral, giving away nothing. First priority is protecting the civilian who saved my life. Sarah Mitchell. Single mother, works at Crossroads, has family in Phoenix. Viper saw her, warned me. That makes her a target. Doc spoke up, his voice quiet but carrying. If Viper's smart, he'll use her as leverage. Grab her, use her to draw you out. Classic bait play. Bull nodded agreement. We bring her here. Full protection. Move her family too if they're vulnerable. Colt's phone buzz. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. A voice he didn't recognize, young and scared. Mr. Morrison, this is Sarah Mitchell. The men from the diner, they're texting me. They know where I live. They know about my daughter. They sent pictures. Please, I don't know what to do. Every man at the table went still. Colt's voice stayed calm despite the rage building behind his eyes. Sarah, listen carefully. Where are you right now? Still at the diner. Jake told me not to leave until I called you. Good. Smart. Stay there. Lock the doors. I'm sending people to get you. You're going to be safe. I promise you that. Where's your family? Phoenix. My mother and my daughter. They're at my mom's house. Colt looked at Ghost, who was already pulling out his phone. Give me the address, Colt said. We'll have people there in 30 minutes. Sarah's voice shook as she recited numbers and street names. Ghost texted the information to Phoenix, chapter fingers, moving faster on the prosthetic hands, touch-sensitive fingertips than most people managed with flesh. Sarah, one more thing. Did you tell anyone else about what happened? Police friends number, just Jake. And now you. Keep it that way. Don't talk to police. Don't post on social media. Don't tell anyone anything. We'll handle this. You're under Iron Wolf's protection now. That means your family. Nobody touches family. Silence on the other end of the line. Then quietly, I'm not part of your world. I can't be part of this. Colt's voice went gentle, the tone he'd used with Rebecca when she was scared and needed reassurance more than orders. You became part of this world the second you whispered, don't speak. You saved my life. Now I save yours. That's the code. That's what it means to be family. This isn't negotiable, Sarah. You're ours now. We protect what's ours. He ended the call and looked around the table. Bull takes 6 men to Crossroads. Bring Sarah here. Ghost coordinate with Phoenix chapter on extracting her mother and daughter. Ace, I want full security lockdown on the compound. Doc, prep the guest quarters. Clutch, inventory our weapons. If this goes sideways, we need to be ready for war. The men dispersed to their assignments. Only Ghost remained, his expression troubled. Boss, if Diablo's behind this, it's not just about revenge. He's been circling our territory for 2 years. This might be the excuse he's been waiting for. Hit you make it look like he's responding to aggression, justify a full takeover. Colt nodded slowly. I know. That's why we can't respond with immediate violence. We need intel first. Need to know Diablo's full strategy. Need leverage. Ghost's prosthetic hand flexed servos, whirring quietly. And if he forces our hand, if he comes at us before we're ready, then we fight. But smart, tactical. The way we were trained, Desert Storm rules superior position, superior intelligence, overwhelming force only when we have no other choice. Ghost stood to leave, then paused in the doorway. Brother, 33 years I've been waiting to repay that debt from Kuwait. Today you let a civilian protect you. Next time that's my job. That's what I owe. Don't forget that. After Ghost left, Colt sat alone in the conference room staring at maps that showed Iron Wolf's territory in careful detail. Routes and properties and businesses built over 23 years of leadership. Everything his father had started, everything Colt had expanded and defended and tried to make legitimate. Rebecca's voice echoed in memory. Dad, why didn't you come? Because I was here, baby. Because I was protecting. This, because I thought club business mattered more than one phone call. He'd been wrong then. Catastrophically, irredeemably wrong. But maybe he could be right this time. Maybe he could protect someone who needed it. Maybe he could answer the call that mattered instead of letting it go to voicemail while he argued about territory and routes and meaningless bullshit that would all burn down eventually anyway. His phone buzzed again. Text from Bull. Package secured, Sarah's en route. Phoenix chapter has mother and daughter bringing them up tonight. All three safe. Colt exhaled slowly, tension releasing from shoulders that had been locked tight since the moment Sarah whispered her warning. She was safe. Her family was safe. That was something. That was a start. But Viper was still out there. Diablo was still circling. And somewhere in the complex web of this morning's attack was an informant who'd sold out their own club, their own brothers, for reasons Colt couldn't yet fathom. The war had started. The question now was how many people would die before it ended, and whether Colt could keep his promise to Sarah the way he'd failed to keep his promises to Rebecca. Outside, autumn sun tracked across Arizona sky, indifferent to human violence, indifferent to promises made and broken, indifferent to the small dramas of men trying to build something worth defending in a world that specialized in tearing things down. Sarah Mitchell had wanted safety. What she got was war. And Wade Morrison was about to teach her that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to become dangerous yourself. The compound gates closed behind Bull's truck with the finality of a prison door, except Sarah couldn't tell if she was being protected or imprisoned. The difference might not matter. She sat in the passenger seat, hands knotted in her lap, watching armed men move through the compound with military precision. This was not the world she understood. Diners and tips and making rent, those were the problems she knew how to solve. Motorcycle clubs and attempted murders and territorial wars existed in a different universe entirely, one she'd accidentally fallen into by whispering two words. Bull cut the engine, his bulk shifting in the driver's seat as he turned to face her. 55 years old, prison tattoos faded to blue-green shadows on his forearms, eyes that had seen too much violence to pretend the world was anything other than what it was. But his voice came out gentle, almost paternal. Nobody here is going to hurt you. I know this looks intimidating. Hell, it is intimidating. But you're family now. That means something to us, even if it doesn't mean anything to you yet. Sarah's throat closed around words that wouldn't form. Through the windshield, she could see the main clubhouse, brick and steel, and security cameras tracking every movement. Men in leather vests moved between buildings, their patches declaring allegiance to the snarling wolf that marked Iron Wolf's territory. A separate structure advertised Morrison's Custom Auto Repair, the legitimate business that apparently funded whatever else happened here. Gardens stretched behind the main building, vegetables growing in neat rows that seemed absurdly domestic against the fortified compound aesthetic. Bull opened his door, came around to Sarah's side, offered his hand like he was helping her out of a limousine instead of extracting her from protective custody. She took it because her legs had gone numb during the drive sensation creeping back in pins and needles as her feet hit gravel. The man who'd introduced himself as Ghost appeared in the clubhouse doorway, his prosthetic fingers catching autumn sunlight in brief metallic flashes. Behind him came an older man moving carefully on a cane and another with a medical bag, whose eyes held the particular distance Sarah recognized from her cousin, who'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan. Trauma left marks. These men wore theirs openly. Sarah Ghost said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume. Welcome to Iron Wolves. I know this isn't what you signed it up for, but you're safe here. Your family will be here tonight. Until we neutralize the threat, this is home. Sarah found her voice, though it came out smaller than she wanted. I have a job. Bills. I can't just disappear. Ghost exchanged glances with Bull, some silent communication passing between them. Jake's been informed you're taking emergency leave. Family medical situation. He understands even if he doesn't know details. Your rent's covered for next 3 months. Consider it hazard pay for saving the boss's life. The casual efficiency of it stunned Sarah into silence. These men had reorganized her entire life in the span of 2 hours, making decisions about her employment and finances without consultation, boxing her into dependence before she'd even agreed to accept help. The part of her that had been fiercely independent since her daughter's father had abandoned them at 19 wanted to rage against the presumption. But the part that had seen cold murder in those 3 men's eyes understood survival sometimes required accepting help from dangerous people. Colt emerged from the clubhouse, and Sarah's breath caught despite herself. In the diner, he'd seemed controlled, careful a man performing the role of friendly regular. Here in his own territory, surrounded by men who followed his orders, he was something else entirely. Dangerous, powerful, the kind of man who made decisions that got people killed or kept them alive and lived with both outcomes without flinching. He approached with the same economy of movement she'd noticed before, nothing wasted, every step purposeful. When he stopped in front of her, his eyes held hers with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. "You saved my life. That creates bonds that don't break easily in my world. I know you don't understand the rules yet. I know this is terrifying, but I keep my promises, Sarah. I promised you'd be safe, your family would be safe. I will die before I let that promise break." Something in his voice, some bedrock certainty beneath the words, made Sarah believe him. This was a man who'd failed someone once and built his entire existence around never failing again. She didn't know the details yet, didn't understand what drove him, but she recognized the shape of old guilt, old grief, old determination to make amends for sins that couldn't be undone. "What happens now?" Colt glanced at Ghost, who nodded once. "Now you wait while we gather intelligence. Your mother and daughter arrive tonight. Tomorrow we start teaching you how to protect yourself. Day after we figure out who's coordinating this attack and we end it." Sarah's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her jacket pockets. "I don't know how to be part of this world." Colt's expression softened fractionally. "Nobody does at first. But you learn. We'll teach you. Come on, I'll show you where you'll be staying." The guest quarters occupied a separate building behind the main clubhouse, 2 bedrooms, and a living area that felt more like a small apartment than prisoner housing. The furniture was simple but clean, the kitchenette stocked with basics, the bathroom supplied with toiletries still in packaging. One bedroom held a double bed and dresser. The other had been set up for a child, complete with stuffed animals arranged on the pillow and a bookshelf filled with young adult novels. Sarah stared at the children's room, emotion threatening to overwhelm her, carefully maintained control. "How did you know?" Colt stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. "Ghost called ahead, had people pick up supplies. My daughter was 8 at once. I remember what she liked at that age. Was. Past tense." Sarah heard the weight behind that single syllable, the universe of loss compressed into 2 letters. "I'm sorry." Colt's jaw tightened. "Me too. Every day. But that's why I know what matters. Why I won't let anything happen to Lily, or your mother, or you." He turned to leave, paused at the threshold. "There's a photo on the dresser in your room. Rebecca, my daughter. She died 2 years ago because I wasn't there when she needed me. I was in a meeting arguing about territory. She called for a ride home. I didn't answer. She got in a car with someone who'd been drinking. She died because I chose club business over my child." Sarah's heart broke for this dangerous man carrying impossible grief. "You couldn't have known." Colt looked back at her, his eyes holding oceans of regret. "That's what everyone says. Doesn't make it easier. Doesn't bring her back. But it taught me what matters. People matter. Family matters. Everything else is just noise. Remember that when things get complicated. Remember what you're fighting for." After he left, Sarah found the photo. A teenage girl with Colt's dark eyes and a smile that suggested mischief barely contained, holding up a fish on a line, pride radiating from every pixel. Rebecca, the ghost haunting this compound, driving the man who ran it, shaping every decision through her absence. Sarah sat on the bed that had been prepared for her daughter and let herself cry for the first time since the diner. Not from fear, though fear lived in her bones now. Not from shock, though shock still hummed through her nervous system. But from the sudden understanding that she'd stumbled into someone else's grief, become entangled in their attempt at redemption, and there was no clean way to extricate herself without betraying the desperate hope in Colt's eyes when he'd promised to keep her family safe. Night fell across the compound with the shocking speed of desert darkness, temperature dropping 20 degrees in an hour. Sarah stood at the window, watching men move between buildings, their shadows stretching long in halogen security lights. Somewhere out there, 3 men were planning her death, or her capture, or whatever strategic value a waitress held in motorcycle club politics. Somewhere out there, her daughter was being transported by strangers wearing gang colors. Somewhere out there, the normal life Sarah had built from nothing was burning down, and all she could do was watch from behind fortified walls. Headlights swept across the compound at 832 SUVs, rolling through the gates with the measured caution of convoy movements. Sarah's heart lurched. Bull appeared at her door, his massive frame somehow reassuring. Your family's here. Phoenix chapter came through. No complications. Sarah ran. Out the door across the gravel lot, reaching the first SUV as its rear door opened. Lily tumbled out 8 years old and terrified, and clutching Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed rabbit she'd had since infancy. Sarah caught her daughter in arms that shook with relief and residual fear. Mama, baby. Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Patricia emerged from the second vehicle, moving carefully on legs weakened by chemotherapy, her face gray with exhaustion and fear. But her eyes found Sarah's, and whatever she saw there made her nod once, accepting this bizarre situation the way she'd accepted every other crisis life had thrown at them. Sarah hugged her mother with one arm, still holding Lily with the other, the three of them forming a small island of family in a sea of dangerous strangers. Colt approached slowly, giving them space, waiting until Lily looked up with tear-streaked face and red eyes. Are you the motorcycle man? Colt knelt, bringing himself to eye level with the child. I am. My name's Wade, but people call me Colt. Your mom saved my life today. That makes her a hero. And we protect heroes and their families. Lily's grip on Mr. Whiskers tightened. The men on the phone said they'd hurt us. Are they going to hurt us? Colt's voice stayed gentle, but carried absolute conviction. No, I promise you, Lily, nobody is going to hurt you or your grandma or your mom. Not while I'm alive. Do you believe me? Lily studied him with the serious intensity children bring to important questions. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. Okay. Can I see the motorcycles tomorrow? Colt smiled, the first genuine warmth Sarah had seen from him. Tomorrow. First thing. Deal? Deal. Patricia caught Sarah's eye, the silent conversation between mother and daughter requiring no words. Are we safe? Sarah nodded. As safe as we can be. Patricia's expression said she'd reserve judgment, but would trust Sarah's assessment for now. They settled into the guest quarters with the surreal domesticity of refugees adapting to temporary shelter. Patricia took the master bedroom, insisting Sarah and Lily share the second room the way they had during the worst financial stretches when apartment space was measured by what they could afford rather than what they needed. Lily explored with the resilient curiosity of childhood, finding books and stuffed animals and a small TV with streaming services already configured. Sarah made sandwiches from the supplies in the kitchenette, her hands moving through familiar motions while her mind spun through impossible scenarios. How long would they be here? What happened if Colt couldn't stop the men hunting them? What kind of life was she condemning? Lily to this world of violence and leather, and men who solve problems with tactics instead of conversation. A knock on the door after 9 o'clock. Sarah tensed, but it was only Ghost carrying a wireless router and what looked like a tablet. Figured Lily might want to stay connected with school friends. We set up secure Wi-Fi routes through VPN untraceable. She can video chat, do homework, whatever keeps her routine normal. The thoughtfulness stunned Sarah. Thank you, you didn't have to do that. Ghost's expression stayed neutral, but something softened around his eyes. Colt's daughter was a year older than Lily when she died. He remembers what matters to kids that age. Connection. Normalcy. Feeling like the world hasn't completely ended, even when adults are terrified. He set up the equipment with practiced efficiency, showed Sarah how to access safe websites, left a card with phone numbers for emergencies. You need anything day or night, you call. Someone will answer. Someone will come. That's the promise. After he left, Sarah sat on the couch watching Lily video chat with her best friend, 8-year-old conversation about nothing and everything, the blessed ordinary concerns of homework and crushes and whether horses or dolphins were cooler. Patricia settled beside Sarah, her thin hand finding her daughter's. Tell me the truth. How bad is this? Sarah kept her voice low enough that Lily wouldn't overhear. 3 men tried to kill the club president. I warned him. Now they're targeting me to draw him out. These people, the Iron Wolves, they're protecting us. But I don't know how this ends. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, watching her granddaughter's animated face. Your father ran when things got hard, when I got pregnant with you, when bills piled up, when life required showing up. He ran. These people, these dangerous men in their leather, in their fortress, they showed up. They're here. That counts for something. Sarah thought about Colt's grief, Ghost's loyalty, Bull's gentleness despite his size. Complicated men in a complicated world trying to live by codes that made sense to them, even when those codes led to violence. Yeah, it counts for something. I just wish I knew what. Morning arrived with desert sun burning away the night's cold temperature, climbing toward the mid-70s by 8 a.m. Sarah woke to find Lily already dressed and waiting by the window, Mr. Whiskers tucked under one arm. Is it tomorrow yet? Can we see the motorcycles now? Sarah dressed quickly, checked on Patricia, who was sleeping deeply for the first time in weeks, according to the peaceful set of her features. They emerged into compound morning, the place transformed by daylight from threatening fortress to something almost normal. Men worked on bikes in the open garage, tools clanging classic rock, playing from speakers. The smell of coffee and bacon drifted from the clubhouse kitchen. Someone was mowing the lawn behind the main building, the mundane suburban sound completely at odds with Sarah's expectations. Colt appeared from the garage, grease staining his hands, looking more like a mechanic than a criminal. He wiped his palms on a rag, smiled at Lily. Ready for that tour? Lily nodded enthusiastically, her fear from last night apparently forgotten or suppressed beneath childhood's remarkable capacity for adaptation. Colt led them through the garage, explaining different bike models with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved the machines. Lily asked a million questions about speeds and gears and why some bikes were loud and others quiet. Sarah watched her daughter's face light up with interest, watched Colt's expression soften as he answered each question with patience and detail. This one's mine. He stopped beside a black and chrome Harley that looked like it cost more than Sarah's annual salary. Soft-tail Deluxe. Bought it the year Rebecca was born. She used to sit on it when she was about your age, pretend she was riding. Can I sit on it? Colt glanced at Sarah, who nodded permission. Sure, but don't touch the controls. Just sit. He lifted Lily onto the seat, the child's legs dangling well short of the foot pegs, her hands gripping the handlebars with exaggerated care. Sarah pulled out her phone, snapped a photo because this moment was too surreal not to document. Her daughter sitting on a motorcycle club president's bike, grinning like she'd found treasure. Ghost appeared in the garage entrance, his expression serious enough to cut through the moment's lightness. Boss, need a word. Colt lifted Lily down, ruffled her hair. Think about it. In 10 years you want to learn to ride? I'll teach you. Your mom's permission only. He followed Ghost out, leaving Sarah and Lily in the garage. Bull materialized from somewhere, his bulk filling the doorway. Lily, you want to see the puppies? Lily's eyes went wide. You have puppies? 6 of them, rescue dogs, all different breeds. They're out back in the kennel. Lily looked at Sarah with pleading desperation. Please go. Stay with Bull. Don't wander off. Bull extended his massive hand and Lily took it without hesitation, already asking questions about the dogs' names and ages and favorite toys. They disappeared toward the back of the compound, leaving Sarah alone in the garage, surrounded by machines that represented freedom to their riders and danger to everyone else. She followed the direction Colt and Ghost had gone, not quite eavesdropping, but not quite respecting privacy either. They stood near the clubhouse entrance, voices low but carrying. Intel from Las Vegas. Viper's been seen at Nevada Viper's clubhouse. Diablo's hosting him personally. That's not just sanctuary. That's endorsement. Means this is sanctioned, not just personal revenge. Colt's jaw tightened. What else? Chatter suggests Diablo's planning something big. Anniversary run Demons Run rally. 3 weeks. Every major club in the Southwest will be there. Neutral ground, traditional truce. But perfect cover for an operation if you're willing to violate the rules. Demons Run. Sarah had heard of it, massive motorcycle rally that drew thousands of riders annually. The kind of event that made local news and required extra police presence and shut down entire sections of highway. You think he's planning a move during the rally? Ghost nodded slowly. Makes tactical sense. Crowd cover. Witnesses everywhere so it looks like random violence instead of calculated hit. He kills you in front of 5,000 bikers, claims you started it, takes your territory while we're leaderless, and everyone's too confused to respond effectively. Colt was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. Then we use that. If we know the where and when, we can prepare. Turn his trap into ours. Too risky. You'd be walking into a kill zone. I'll be walking into an opportunity. With proper preparation. Right people in right positions. Element of surprise on our side for once. Ghost prosthetic hand, flex servos whirring. Brother, I didn't save your ass in Desert Storm to watch you get killed at a motorcycle rally. There's got to be another way. If there is, I'm listening. But Diablo won't stop. Viper won't stop. They'll keep coming at us, at our families, at anyone we care about until we end this. Better to end it on our terms than wait for them to pick the moment. Sarah stepped back before they could notice her listening. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 3 weeks until some rally where Colt planned to use himself as bait to draw out the men who wanted him dead. 3 weeks until violence erupted in public, where Lily might see news coverage where Sarah would have to explain why the man who had promised to protect them was bleeding out in some fairground parking lot. She returned to find Lily playing with rescue dogs, 6 mutts of various sizes and questionable breeding, all competing for an 8-year-old's attention. Bull sat on a bench, watching his scarred face almost gentle. "They're all abused," he said when he noticed Sarah. "Previous owners beat them, starved them, used them for fighting. I foster them, rehabilitate them, find them good homes. Takes patience. Takes showing them not all humans are monsters." Sarah sat beside him, watching her daughter laugh as puppies climbed over her lap. "Why do you do it? The rescue work." Bull was quiet for a moment. "I was inside for 8 years. Assault weapons charges. Stupid shit when I was young and angry. Prison teaches you about powerlessness, about what it means to be at someone else's mercy. These dogs, they know that feeling. I can't fix what happened to them, but I can show them there's better, that they're worth saving." Sarah thought about her own life, the years of barely surviving, of sending money home for her mother's treatment while eating ramen and skipping meals. The grinding poverty that made every day a calculation of which bills to pay and which to let slide. She'd felt powerless then. These last 24 hours had been different. Terrifying, yes. Dangerous, absolutely, but not powerless. The Iron Wolves had given her agency, even if that agency came wrapped in violence and moral complexity. Bull, what happens if Colt's plan fails? If this Diablo person wins, Bull's expression darkened. Then a lot of good men die, and a lot of territory falls under control of someone who runs drugs and traffics people and destroys lives for profit. Colt's trying to build something better. Legitimate businesses, community support, protection without exploitation. He's not perfect. Neither are we. But we're trying. That counts. Does it count? I mean, when you've done terrible things, when you've hurt people, does trying to be better actually matter? Bull looked at her directly. "You asking about us or about yourself?" Sarah's throat tightened. "I watched 3 men plan a murder, and I stopped it by whispering 2 words. Now they want to kill me and my family. I brought this on us. I chose this." Bull shook his head slowly. "You saw evil about to happen, and you intervened. That's not choosing danger. That's choosing courage. What happens next isn't your fault, it's theirs. Don't let guilt make you forget which side you're on." The morning passed in surreal domesticity. Patricia emerged from the guest quarters looking stronger than she had in weeks, the rest apparently doing more good than any medication. Lily played with mice and explored the compound under Bull's watchful supervision. Sarah helped in the clubhouse kitchen, chopping vegetables for lunch, while women who introduced themselves as Iron Wolves old ladies chatted about ordinary things like grocery shopping and children's soccer schedules. It was all so normal, so mundane, right up until the moment screaming started from the front gate. Sarah dropped her knife, ran toward the sound, arriving to find Colt and Ghost restraining a man who was fighting them with desperate strength. Younger than Colt, maybe 45, leather vest marked with Iron Wolves patches, his face contorted with rage and something that looked like grief. The man broke free, for a second stumbled toward the clubhouse, pointing at someone behind Sarah. "You fucking liar, you sold us out. I know it was you." Sarah turned to see Clutch standing in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral, but his hands clenched into fists. Bull and 2 others grabbed the enraged man and forced him to his knees. Colt stood over him, voice cold. "Jackson, calm down. Tell me what's happening." The man Jackson was crying now, rage collapsing into devastation. "Nevada Vipers hit my house this morning, took my wife, left a message saying they know everything about us, know our addresses, our families, our routines, said they got it from someone inside." And he pointed at Clutch again. "He was at my house 2 days ago, saw where my kids sleep, saw where Rachel keeps her car keys." The temperature in the compound dropped to sub-zero. Every Iron Wolf present turned to look at Clutch, questions forming in eyes that had trusted him with their lives and their families. Clutch's face flushed red. That's bullshit. I was there fixing your security system, doing my job as sergeant at arms. You're going to blame me because Diablo's got good intelligence, Colt's voice cut through the rising tension. Everybody back. Now, Jackson Bull, take care of him. Get him somewhere quiet. Ghost Clutch conference room. Now, they filed inside Colt's authority, holding the situation together by force of will. Sarah should have returned to the kitchen, should have stayed out of club business, should have maintained the distance between civilian and criminal. But she'd stopped 3 murders yesterday. She'd earned the right to know if the man protecting her was being betrayed from within. She followed, slipping into the conference room behind Doc, positioning herself where she could watch but wouldn't be immediately noticed. Colt stood at the head of the table, Ghost to his right, Clutch isolated on the opposite side. The separation was deliberate positioning that declared suspicion before words could. Clutch, Colt said quietly, "Give me your phone." Clutch's eyes flashed. "You're seriously doing them, believing Jackson's paranoid bullshit over your own brother? Blood doesn't make you immune to questions. Phone. Now." For 5 seconds, Sarah thought Clutch would refuse. Thought violence would erupt in this room, brother against brother. Loyalty tested past breaking. Then Clutch pulled his phone from his pocket, slammed it on the table hard enough to crack the screen. "Fine. You want to violate my privacy? Go ahead. You won't find shit." Ghost picked up the phone, his prosthetic fingers navigating the screen with practiced ease. His expression changed. After 30 seconds, went carefully blank in the way people did when they were seeing something they didn't want to believe. "Boss, you need to see this." Colt took the phone, read whatever Ghost had found, and his face went absolutely still. When he looked up at Clutch, his eyes held something worse than anger. Disappointment. Betrayal. The specific grief of discovering family had chosen sides against you. Text messages with Marcus Kane. Planning sessions. Intelligence about my Thursday routine. About Jackson's house. About 6 other members' families. Payment confirmations. $75,000 transferred from an account linked to Alejandro Vargas. Clutch stood so fast his chair tipped out backward. "That's fabricated. Someone hacked my phone, planted that shit to frame me." Ghost's voice came out flat, dead. "Messages go back 4 months, including conversations about removing Colt from leadership, about taking control of Iron Wolves and aligning with Nevada Vipers. Your words, brother. Your betrayal." Sarah's hands had gone numb. She'd been living under protection of a club where the sergeant at arms, the president's own brother, was selling them out to their enemies. Every secret she'd trusted them with, every detail about Lily and Patricia, had been potentially compromised by the man standing 3 feet from Colt. Clutch's expression cycled through denial, rage, calculation, finally settling on bitter defiance. "You want to know why? Fine, I'll tell you why. 20 years I've given this club. 20 years riding under your leadership while you made decisions like you were God. Dad founded Iron Wolves, and when he died, it should have been shared. Brothers leading together. But no, the precious Gulf War hero gets the president patch while his little brother gets sergeant at arms like a consolation prize." Colt's voice stayed level despite fury burning behind his eyes. "Dad chose me because I put the club first. You just proved why you'll never sit in this chair. You sold out your brothers for money and ego. You endangered families. Children." Clutch laughed, the sound ugly and broken. "You want to talk about family? You let your daughter die because you were too busy playing president to answer her phone call. At least I didn't kill my own kid." The room exploded. Ghost lunged across the table, got one hand on Clutch's throat before Bull and Ace dragged him back. Colt stood absolutely frozen, Clutch's words hitting like hollow point rounds designed to fragment and spread maximum damage. Sarah saw Colt's face, saw the flash of agony that Clutch had deliberately inflicted, saw the way old guilt got weaponized by someone who knew exactly where to aim. She moved without thinking, positioning herself between Colt and his brother, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You want to know what real strength looks like? It's not selling out people who trusted you. It's not collecting money while families get threatened. Real strength is saving lives when you have nothing to gain. Real strength is keeping promises even when they cost everything. He's," she pointed at Colt, "he's got more honor in his grief than you've got in your entire treacherous soul." Clutch's eyes focused on Sarah with laser precision. "The waitress, the civilian who started all this. You think you understand our world? You're just another casualty waiting to happen. Sarah held his gaze. Maybe. But I'll be a casualty who chose the right side. What will you be? Ghost had regained control, his voice icy. Church vote. Clutch Morrison, you're charged with betraying your club, selling intelligence to enemies endangering brothers and their families. Traditional penalty is death. All in favor. Hands rose around the table. Everyone except Colt, who stood with arms at his sides, staring at his brother with an expression Sarah couldn't read. Boss Ghost prompted gently. Colt's voice came out rough. He's still my brother, still family, even if he forgot what that means. I won't vote for his execution. Then what? Clutch spat. You're going to let me walk? No. You're going to tell us everything. Every detail of Diablo's operation. Every plan, every timeline, every weakness. Then you're going out in bad standing. Patches stripped, bike destroyed. You leave Arizona. If you ever come back, we won't be merciful twice. Clutch's laugh sounded like something dying. You think Diablo will let me walk after this? You're signing my death warrant. Colt's expression hardened. You signed it yourself the moment you betrayed your brothers. Now you live with the consequences. Start talking, beginning with Demon's Run. What's the plan? 3 hours of interrogation followed. Sarah listened from her corner, taking notes on her phone, documenting everything Clutch revealed. Diablo planned to use the rally as cover for eliminating Iron Wolves' leadership. Viper would lead the strike team. Colt would be targeted, publicly made into an example. The goal wasn't just territorial acquisition. It was sending a message that honor and loyalty were weaknesses in a world where only power and ruthlessness mattered. Clutch spilled it all, motivated by self-preservation more than remorse. He'd been planning this for 2 years, building relationships with Nevada Vipers, feeding them intelligence, positioning himself to take over Iron Wolves after Colt's removal. The money had been secondary. The real motivation was ego resentment, the decades-long grievance of a younger brother who'd never felt adequately recognized. When it was done, when every detail had been extracted and verified, Colt stood. Ghost Bull Doc, strip his patches, ace catalog, and destroy his bike. Clutch, well, you got 1 hour to pack your shit and leave. I see you again, you're dead. That's not a threat. That's a promise. They dragged Clutch outside. Sarah heard the roar of an engine being revved, heard the sudden silence as it cut off, heard what sounded like a sledgehammer hitting metal, destroying the bike. The ultimate punishment in motorcycle culture, obliterating the machine that represented freedom and identity and belonging. Colt sat alone at the conference table, head in his hands. Sarah approached carefully, not sure if her presence would be welcome or intrusive. He spoke without looking up. You shouldn't have done that. Defended me to him. Now he knows you matter. That makes you more vulnerable. Sarah sat across from him. He already knew. They've been threatening my family since yesterday. What I did was choose my side. Same as you chose yours when you refused to kill him. Colt looked up, his eyes red-rimmed with unshed tears. He's my brother. I can't just erase that, no matter what he's done, no. But you can stop letting him use your guilt as a weapon. Rebecca's death wasn't your fault. You didn't put her in that car. You didn't pour the drinks. You were a father who made a mistake, and the universe punished you in the cruelest possible way. But you've spent 2 years trying to redeem that mistake by protecting everyone else. That counts. That matters. Colt's hands trembled. Does it? Because from where I'm sitting, all I've done is bring more danger into more lives. Yours, Lily's, your mother's. Jackson's wife is being held hostage because I failed to see my own brother's betrayal. Sarah reached across the table, took his hand in both of hers. You didn't betray anyone. Clutch did. You're trying to fix it. You're fighting to protect people who can't protect themselves. That's the opposite of failure. That's heroism, even if it doesn't feel like it. Ghost appeared in the doorway. Clutch is gone. Heading north, probably trying to reach Canada before Diablo figures out he talked. Jackson's wife, we've got people working on extraction. Should have her back by tonight. Colt nodded, pulling himself together through visible effort. Good. Double security on the compound. I want eyes on every approach. Sarah, your family doesn't leave the grounds. Not until this is finished. 3 weeks, Sarah said quietly, until demons run. That's when you're planning to end this. Colt's expression confirmed what she'd overheard earlier. Yeah, 3 weeks. We use the rally as our trap instead of Diablo's. Turn his own plan against him. But first we prepare, and that includes you. Sarah felt ice water in her veins. What do you mean? Colt stood, his presence filling the room. You're in this whether you want to be or not. Diablo knows your face. Viper wants revenge on you for warning me. You're a target, so we're going to teach you how to survive, how to fight, how to protect yourself and your family if everything goes wrong. Starting tomorrow. No arguments. Sarah thought about Lily playing with rescue dogs, about Patricia finally sleeping peacefully, about the normal life that was ashes now. She thought about three men plotting murder over coffee, about the cold calculation in their eyes, about how close she'd come to watching violence erupt in her diner. Bull was right. She'd chosen courage. Now she needed to learn how to back that courage with capability. Okay, teach me. Colt's expression held something that might have been respect. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow your education begins. Fair warning, it's going to hurt. Ghost doesn't believe in gentle instruction. Ghost smiled, the expression wolfish. Gentle gets you killed. Sarah's going to learn the hard way because that's the way that sticks. But she'll survive. She's got the fire. Just needs to learn how to aim it. Sarah returned to his guest quarters as desert sun dropped toward evening temperature, falling with the light. Lily was teaching Patricia a card game she'd learned from Bull, the two of them laughing over complicated rules and contested plays. Normal. Domestic. The kind of scene Sarah had dreamed of during the hardest years when making rent meant choosing between electricity and groceries. Except they were laughing in a motorcycle club compound, protected by dangerous men, while other dangerous men planned their deaths. Normal had become relative. Safety had become contextual. And Sarah had 3 weeks to learn how to fight in a world where fighting might be the only thing that kept her family alive. She joined them at the table, picking up cards, playing the game, like tomorrow wasn't going to bring pain and training and the systematic destruction of whatever illusions she still carried about her own capability. Lily leaned against her side, warm and trusting. Patricia's hand found hers across the table, squeeze of solidarity and shared determination. They would survive this. Somehow. Because the alternative was unthinkable, and Sarah Mitchell had never let the unthinkable stop her from protecting what mattered. Outside the compound, settled into night watch, armed men taking positions, security systems activated, a fortress preparing for siege. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the walls, enemies planned their moves while allies gathered intelligence, and 3 weeks counted down toward violence that would determine whether honor or ruthlessness ruled this stretch of Arizona desert. Morning arrived with the kind of brutal clarity that desert landscapes specialized in, shadows sharp as broken glass, air cold enough to sting lungs before the sun climbed high enough to punish exposed skin. Sarah stood in the compound's training yard at 6 a.m., watching Ghost wrap his hands with tape that had seen enough use to qualify as veteran equipment. Bull stretched nearby, his bulk moving through warm-up exercises that looked gentle until Sarah noticed the precision, the controlled power behind each movement. Doc leaned against the fence, observing medical bag at his feet, his presence both reassuring and ominous. Men didn't bring medics to easy training sessions. Ghost finished taping, flexed his prosthetic fingers, looked at Sarah with eyes that held no sympathy. Rule 1, pain is information. Your body telling you something's wrong. Don't ignore it, but don't let it stop you either. Rule 2, fights end fast. Real violence isn't choreographed. It's ugly, desperate, over in seconds. Rule 3, you fight to survive, not to win. Survival means doing whatever keeps you breathing. Winning is a luxury you can't afford. Sarah's stomach twisted, but she nodded. Lily was still sleeping, Patricia watching her, both of them safe behind walls and armed guards. That was what mattered. Not Sarah's comfort, not her fear, just keeping them alive. Show me how you'd defend yourself if someone grabbed you. Ghost moved faster than Sarah expected, his hand closing around her wrist with pressure that locked her bones. Instinct made her pull back, trying to yank free. Ghost's grip didn't budge. Pulling away is natural, also useless against someone stronger. Try again. Sarah pulled harder, desperation leaking into the attempt. Ghost held steady, immovable. You're trying to overpower me. Can't be done. I'm bigger, stronger, trained. You need to think different. Where am I vulnerable? Sarah's mind raced, adrenaline making thought difficult. Your eyes, throat ghost smiled predatory. Better, but you're still grabbed. Can't reach my face if I'm controlling your arm. Think closer. What body parts are you already near? Sarah looked down at their connected limbs, saw Ghost's exposed hand, his fingers wrapped around her wrist. Your hand. Ghost released her step back. Exactly. Someone grabs you, they're giving you a target. Fingers break easy, thumbs especially. Grab, twist, pull back. Most people let go when bones start grinding. He demonstrated slowly, showing the angle, the leverage point, the specific motion that would turn a grab into an opportunity. Now you try. For real, I'm going to grab you and you're going to break my grip. Don't hold back. I've had worse than anything you can do. Sarah hesitated, suddenly aware she was about to intentionally hurt someone who'd shown her nothing but protection. I can't just. Ghost hands shot out, locked around her wrist with bruising force. Attacker doesn't care about your hesitation. Move. Sarah grabbed his thumb, pulled, twisted with everything she had. Ghost's grip broke, surprise flickering across his face. Good, again. They drilled for an hour, repetition burning the movement into muscle memory. Wrist grabs, chokeholds, someone pinning her against a wall. Each scenario had a counter, some leverage point or vulnerable target that could turn defense into escape. Sarah's body cataloged bruises, her mind cataloged techniques, and slowly something shifted. The helpless terror that had lived in her chest since the diner began transforming into something harder. Not confidence exactly, but possibility. The knowledge that she wasn't completely powerless. Bull took over after Ghost teaching her about awareness and positioning. How to read a room, identify exits, notice people watching too carefully. How to move through crowds without drawing attention. How to position herself where walls protected her back and sight lines stayed clear. Crossroads Diner, he said. Walk me through that morning. Where were you positioned when those three men came in? Sarah closed her eyes, reconstructed the memory. Behind the counter, coffee pot in hand, they sat in booth 9 corner position, watching the parking lot. Good. Did you choose your position or did circumstance put you there? Circumstance. I was refilling sugar containers, happened to be behind the counter when they entered. Bull nodded. Luck. This time it worked in your favor, gave you proximity to Colt when you needed it. But you can't rely on luck. You need to deliberately position yourself where you have advantages. Near exits, near weapons, near allies. Training isn't just about fighting. It's about never needing to fight because you're always in the right place. They walked the compound. Bull pointing out strategic positions, explaining fields of fire and cover and escape routes. Military thinking applied to civilian life, the habits of men who'd survived combat by learning to read terrain and anticipate threats. Doc's turn came after lunch, teaching Sarah basic first aid with intensity that suggested experience treating injuries far worse than scraped knees. Gunshot wounds bleed different than knife wounds. Arterial blood spurts, venous blood flows. You see spurting, you've got maybe 2 minutes before someone dies. Direct pressure, elevate if possible, tourniquet as last resort. Don't try to be a hero. Stop the bleeding. Get them to real medical help. He made her practice on training dummies, simulated wounds that leaked fake blood scenarios. Sorry, where Sarah had to decide priorities and act under pressure. Who to treat first when multiple people were injured. How to tell if someone was actually dying or just looked bad. The brutal calculus of triage, deciding who lived and who didn't based on resources and probability. Sarah's hands shook as she worked, imagining Lily bleeding out, while Sarah fumbled with bandages, imagining Patricia collapsed and Sarah having to choose between moving her or stopping blood loss. You're thinking about your family, Doc said quietly. Good, that's the right motivation. But channel it. Fear makes you freeze or panic. Purpose makes you move. Remember why you're learning this, not to prepare for tragedy, to prevent it. 3 days of training passed in exhausted blur. Sarah woke before dawn, trained until her body screamed, protest ate mechanically, returned to training, collapsed into sleep so deep that dreams couldn't penetrate. Lily asked questions about the bruises blooming across Sarah's arms. Patricia watched with worried eyes but said nothing, understanding that sometimes survival required pushing past comfort into capability. Colt observed from distance, never interfering, occasionally nodding approval when Sarah executed a technique correctly. His presence was both reassuring and pressure reminder that he'd staked his reputation on protecting her. That failure meant more than just her death. It meant his promise breaking another person he couldn't save, another ghost joining Rebecca in haunting him. On the fourth day, Ghost announced they were moving to weapons training. Firearms aren't magic. They're tools, dangerous tools that require respect and training. Most people who carry guns have never been in a situation where they actually need to use them. If you ever have to pull that trigger, it means everything else failed. Understand? Sarah nodded, throat dry. The range occupied the compound's far corner berms and targets set up with professional precision. Ghost handed her a Glock 19, smaller than the weapons she'd seen in movies, heavier than she'd expected. 9mm, standard defense weapon, 15 rounds in the magazine, one in the chamber if you rack the slide. Safety is here, trigger discipline is everything. You never point this at anything you're not willing to destroy. You never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire. These aren't suggestions. These are absolute rules. He demonstrated stance, grip, sight alignment, made Sarah repeat the motions empty-handed until muscle memory took over, then loaded the weapon, step back, let her fire at paper targets 20 feet away. The first shot surprised her recoil and noise, and the sudden understanding that she just sent a piece of metal down range at speeds that could end life. Her hand shook. The target remained unmarked, her shot going wide. Again, control your breathing. Squeeze, don't pull. Anticipating recoil makes you jerk the shot. Sarah fired again, missed again. Frustration built the same helpless anger she'd felt during those years of poverty, when no matter how hard she worked, bills kept piling up and progress stayed out of reach. Ghost's hand on her shoulder, firm, but not unkind. You're thinking too much. Fighting yourself. Stop trying to control everything. Just breathe, a line squeeze. Let the weapon do its job. Sarah closed her eyes, centered herself the way Bull had taught, breathed, opened her eyes, acquired sight picture, squeezed the trigger, like Ghost said, instead of pulling. The target's center mass showed a new hole. There. Ghost's voice held satisfaction. That's the difference. Trust your training. Your body knows what to do if your mind stops interfering. By the end of the session, Sarah was hitting center mass 7 times out of 15. Not great, but better than nothing. Better than being completely helpless when violence came. Colt appeared as they were cleaning weapons, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. You're doing good, better than most people after 4 days. But understanding mechanics isn't enough. You need to know when to use what you've learned. And when to run. Sarah looked up from the Glock. She was field stripping under Ghost's supervision. How do I know the difference? Colt sat on the bench beside her, his voice quiet enough that only she could hear. You run when running keeps your family safe. You fight when fighting buys them time to escape. You never fight to prove something, or because you're angry, or because someone hurt your pride. Those are ego decisions. Ego gets you killed. You fight for one reason only, because there's no other choice left. Sarah thought about the diner, about whispering those 2 words, about choosing involvement over safety. I didn't run then, because running wouldn't have saved me. My security detail was outside. By the time you could have warned them, bullets would have already flown. You made the right call, tactical, smart, brave. But don't mistake that moment for understanding what real violence feels like. This training prepares you. It doesn't make you invincible. Remember that. The second week brought integration training scenarios where Sarah had to combine everything she'd learned under pressure. Bull and Ghost playing attackers, Doc timing her responses, Ace watching and critiquing. They grabbed her in hallways, simulated ambushes in the garage, made her react while exhausted and scared and disoriented. Sarah failed more than she succeeded. Got knocked down, made wrong decisions, froze when she should have moved. But slowly, incrementally, her response time improved. Muscle memory started overriding panic. The techniques became reflexes, accessible, even when adrenaline was drowning rational thought. Lily watched some of the training, her 8-year-old face serious as she saw her mother learning violence. Sarah worried about the psychological impact, about normalizing brutality to a child who should be thinking about dolls and cartoons and homework. But Lily's question, asked quietly while they ate dinner on day 9, suggested a different understanding. Mama, if someone tries to hurt us, will you be able to stop them? Sarah met her daughter's eyes, refusing to lie. I'm learning how. I'm not perfect. I'm not some superhero. But I'm trying to be strong enough to protect you. That's all I can promise. Lily nodded, satisfied with honesty. Uncle Bull says you're brave, says most people wouldn't even try to learn fighting. They just stay scared. Sarah felt emotion threaten her composure. I am scared, baby. Terrified, actually. But being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing what needs doing anyway. That night, Sarah found Colt in his garden working soil by moonlight, the way he apparently did when sleep wouldn't come. She'd learned his patterns over 2 weeks of proximity, morning workouts, meetings with club members, maintenance work in the garage, evenings spent in this garden growing things that would feed people instead of hurting them. He looked up as she approached, dirt staining his hands, exhaustion evident in the set of his shoulders. Can't sleep, too wired. Too much adrenaline from training. Thought I'd walk it off. Colt gestured to the empty space beside him. Invitation to sit. Sarah lowered herself to the ground, her body cataloging the day's new bruises and strains. You're doing well. Ghost says you've got natural instincts. Bull says your awareness has improved significantly. Doc says you stay calm under pressure better than some combat veterans he's treated. Sarah managed a tired laugh. They're being generous. I feel like I'm stumbling through everything, barely staying ahead of failure. Colt continued working the soil, his movements rhythmic and meditative. That's what competence feels like at first. You're aware enough to recognize how much you don't know. Incompetent people think they are experts because they can't see their blind spots. You can see yours. That's progress. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Night sounds filling the space between words. Somewhere a coyote called eerie ululation that spoke of wild things surviving in hostile territory. Finally, Sarah found the courage to ask what had been haunting her. Demon's Run is in 11 days. You're really planning to use yourself as bait. Colt's hands stilled in the dirt. Ghost has been talking. I overheard. Back when Clutch was still here. You said Diablo's planning something at the rally. You said we'd turn his trap into ours. Colt pulled his hands from the soil, wiped them on his jeans, the gesture buying time to organize thoughts. Diablo wants to eliminate Iron Wolf's leadership. Take our territory. Absorb our businesses. He thinks the rally is perfect cover because of the crowds, the neutral ground, the traditional truce that makes clubs lower their guard. He's planning to violate every rule of motorcycle culture to win. And you're planning what exactly to let him think his plan is working. To position our people where they can respond. To capture evidence of his operation and force him to back down or face consequences that destroy him. Sarah's stomach clenched. That's suicide. You're walking into an ambush, hoping you're faster or smarter or luckier than a man who spent months planning your death. Colt looked at her directly, his eyes holding depths of old war and older grief. Maybe. But I can't keep hiding behind walls waiting for him to make his move. Can't keep your family locked down forever. Can't let fear of dying prevent me from living. And I definitely can't let Viper and Diablo think they can threaten civilians without consequences. This ends at Demon's Run, one way or another. What about Ghost Bull? All the others who'll be there, you're risking them too. They volunteered, every single one. They know the stakes. They believe in what we're building, something better than what Diablo represents. Worth fighting for, worth dying for, if necessary. Sarah thought about Rebecca, about the phone call Colt hadn't answered, about the 2 years of guilt that had shaped every decision since. You're not trying to protect us. You're trying to redeem yourself. You think if you save me and my family, it'll somehow balance the scales for Rebecca. Colt flinched like she'd struck him, maybe. Probably. Does the motivation matter if the result is the same? It matters if you get yourself killed for the wrong reasons. Lily needs you, not as some martyr proving a point. As Uncle Wade, who shows her motorcycles and teaches her that good men exist even in dark places. Patricia needs you, someone who treats her with dignity instead of pity. And Sarah paused, struggling with vulnerability. I need you. Need to know that honor isn't extinct. That promises still matter. That choosing courage over safety wasn't the stupidest decision I've ever made. Colt was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in moonlight. I can't promise I'll survive Demon's Run. Too many variables. Too many things that could go wrong. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to come back. Because you're right, it's not just about redemption anymore. It's about the people who matter now, not just the person I failed before. The third week arrived with temperature dropping toward true autumn desert nights, cold enough to require jackets. Days warm enough that training left everyone soaked with sweat. Sarah's body had adapted to the punishment, muscles developing definition she'd never possessed, reflexes sharpening confidence, building in increments. But Demon's Run loomed countdown, ticking toward violence that no amount of training could fully prepare her for. On day 19, Colt called a full church meeting. Sarah wasn't invited, but Ghost filled her in afterward, his expression grim. Boss laid out the plan. Demon's Run starts tomorrow. We're heading out at dawn. You, Lily, and Patricia stay here. Compound will have reduced security, but still adequate. This ends in 2 days. We come back victorious, or we don't come back at all. Sarah felt ice in her chest. I should be there. I can help. Ghost shook his head. You're not ready. 4 weeks of training doesn't make you a fighter. Makes you capable of basic defense. Big difference. You stay here where it's safe. Let us handle the war. What if something goes wrong? What if you need backup? Then backup won't matter. Either we win decisively or we lose catastrophically. There's no middle ground in the fight we're walking into. That night, Sarah barely slept. Lay in bed listening to Lily's breathing, knowing that tomorrow, dangerous men who'd become something like family would ride toward violence while she stayed behind with her daughter and mother in helpless fear. Dawn arrived cold and clear sky, the color of weapons-grade steel. Sarah stood in the compound yard watching iron wolves prepare. 19 men, total leather vests marking them as family weapons concealed, but present faces set with determination and carefully controlled fear. Colt approached last, his bike loaded with supplies, his expression calm, in the way men got before combat. He knelt beside Lily, who'd woken early and insisted on seeing them off. You remember what I promised, that I'd keep your family safe? Lily nodded solemnly. I'm keeping that promise, but I have to go away for a couple days. While I'm gone, you listen to your mom. You stay inside the compound. You trust the people I'm leaving here to protect you. Can you do that? I can. Will you come back? Colt's hesitation lasted microseconds, but Sarah caught it. I'm going to try very hard. But if I don't, you remember this. Your mom is the bravest person I've ever met. She saved my life when she didn't have to. She learned to fight even though she was terrified. She's going to keep you safe no matter what happens. You trust her. Okay? Lily hugged him, small arms wrapping around his neck. Come back, Uncle Wade. Please come back. Colt stood, emotion flickering across his face before discipline locked it away. He turned to Patricia, who'd emerged wrapped in a blanket against the morning cold. Mrs. Mitchell, I know you didn't ask for any of this. I know your daughter got dragged into my world through no fault of her own. But I want you to know I'd die before I'd let anything happen to them. That's not hyperbole. That's fact. Patricia studied him with the assessing gaze of someone who'd survived enough life to recognize truth when she heard it. I believe you. Bring yourself back too. Sarah needs good men in her life. God knows she's had enough of the other kind. Finally, Colt turned to Sarah. For a moment, neither spoke, communication happening in the space between words. Gratitude, fear, something else. Sarah couldn't name but felt like possibility. You saved my life in that diner. I'm going to Demon's Run to make sure that act meant something. That you didn't risk everything for a man who just postponed dying. Watch over my garden while I'm gone. Tomatoes need watering daily. Rebecca planted those. I'd hate to lose them. Sarah's voice came out rough. I'll water them. You come back and eat what they grow. Deal. Colt smiled, sad and genuine. Deal. Then he was mounting his bike, 19 engines roaring to life simultaneously, formation, pulling through the compound gates toward Route 66 and whatever waited at rally grounds 2 hours south. Sarah watched until exhaust fumes dissipated and engine noise faded to memory, leaving only silence and fear, and the impossible task of waiting while others fought battles she couldn't help win. The first day passed in excruciating slowness. Sarah watered Colt's garden, played card games with Lily, helped Patricia with physical therapy exercises, tried to read books that couldn't hold her attention. The 6 Iron Wolves members left behind for compound security moved through their duties with professional calm, but Sarah saw tension in shoulders, heard it in clipped radio communications. Night fell without news. Sarah lay awake staring at ceiling, imagining scenarios ranging from triumph to tragedy, unable to settle on hope or resignation. The second day brought text from Ghost at noon, brief and uninformative. In position, no contact yet. Rally opens at 5 p.m. Sarah showed Patricia, who squeezed her hand. No news is good news. They're alive. They're smart. They'll come home. But Patricia's eyes betrayed doubt, and Sarah felt the same uncertainty eating at her composure. Evening arrived, sun dropping toward western mountains, temperature falling toward freezing. Sarah was checking on Lily, who'd fallen asleep early from the emotional exhaustion of waiting, when her phone buzzed. Ghost. Not text this time. Call. Sarah answered with shaking hands. Ghost's voice came through, distorted by background noise, shouting what might have been gunfire. Sarah listened carefully. Things went sideways. Diablo had more people than intel suggested. We're pinned down near the maintenance area. Colt's injured, not critical, but not good. We're extracting, but it's going to be close. Ice water replaced blood in Sarah's veins. What do you need? Ghost's laugh held no humor. Nothing you can provide. Just if we don't make it back, you tell Lily that Colt kept his promise. He drew fire away from civilians, saved probably 30 people. That counts for something. The call ended. Sarah stood frozen, phone dead in her hand, the world narrowing to single point of focus. They were fighting, dying maybe, while she stood in safety doing nothing. Patricia appeared in the doorway. That was Ghost, wasn't it? What's happening? Sarah met her mother's eyes, found strength in the woman who'd survived poverty and cancer and single parenthood without breaking. They need help. Colt's injured. They're outnumbered. What are you going to do? Sarah thought about 4 weeks of training, about Ghost teaching her that survival meant doing whatever kept you breathing, about Colt promising to come back and maybe dying before he could keep that promise. Something stupid and brave and possibly necessary. She found the 6 iron wolves left behind, their nominal leader, a man called Reaper, who'd served with Colt in Iraq. Laid out what Ghost had said, watched their faces harden with decision. We can't leave, Reaper said. Orders were explicit. Protect the compound and the civilians. We abandoned posts, were violating direct commands. Sarah's voice came out harder than she'd known she could make it. Colt taught me that honor means protecting people, not following orders blindly. He's dying. Ghost is dying. 18 others are dying. You're going to let them die because you're afraid of violating orders. Reaper's jaw clenched, conflict playing across his face. You don't understand what you're asking. We leave this compound is vulnerable. Your family is vulnerable. Then I'm coming with you. You leave 2 here for basic security. 4 of us go to Demon's Run. We extract our people. We come back. Simple. Reaper stared at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. You've had 4 weeks of training. You're not a fighter. Sarah thought about everything these men had taught her, about the bruises and exhaustion and slow transformation from helpless to capable. Maybe not, but I can shoot straight enough. I can follow orders. And I can be one more body between bullets and the man who saved my life. That's all I'm offering. One more chance for them to survive. Reaper looked at his fellow guards, silent communication passing between combat veterans who understood sacrifice and brotherhood and impossible choices. 2 stay. Protect Mrs. Mitchell and Lily with your lives. 4 of us go. Sarah comes only if she follows every order without question. This isn't negotiation. This is war, understand? Sarah nodded, adrenaline replacing fear with crystalline focus. I understand. Let's go bring them home. The drive to Demon's Run took 90 minutes at speeds that bent legal limits. Sarah rode in the back of an SUV, body armor heavy on her chest, Glock 19 loaded and holstered at her hip, Ghost words echoing in memory. You fight to survive, not to win. Rally grounds appeared ahead, chaos visible even from distance. Flashing lights from police cars and ambulances, crowds scattering the organized event, descending into panic. Reaper parked 3 blocks away, approached on foot using darkness and confusion as cover. They found Ghost coordinating defensive positions behind parked bikes, blood staining his left arm, prosthetic hand flexing with servo damage. His eyes widened, seeing Sarah. What the hell are you doing here? Saving you, apparently. Where's Colt? Ghost pointed toward a maintenance building. Tactical situation becoming clear. Iron Wolves held the structure, maybe 15 of them wounded, being treated inside. Nevada Vipers surrounded the position, maybe 30 strong, pinning them down with superior numbers. Diablo's already gone, fled when police showed up. But Viper's still here, still trying to finish what he started. Colt took 2 rounds, chest and leg. Armor stopped the chest shot. Leg's bad, though. He's losing blood faster than Doc can replace it. Sarah felt decision crystallize with absolute clarity. We need extraction. How Ghost studied the tactical situation, his combat experience, calculating odds and angles. We need to break their perimeter. Draw enough fire that our people can move to vehicles. But someone has to be visible. Someone has to make them commit forces to engagement so others can slip away. That's suicide. Ghost smiled grimly. That's combat. Question is, who volunteers to be the distraction? Sarah thought about Lily sleeping peacefully, about Patricia's trust, about Colt bleeding out because he'd chosen to protect strangers instead of staying safe. Thought about everything these dangerous men had taught her about courage and sacrifice and the price of keeping promises. I'll do it. Every man present turned to stare. Reaper shook his head. Absolutely not. You're civilian. You're under our protection, which means protecting by helping, not hiding. You need a distraction. I'm offering. Set me up with cover fire. Give me 30 seconds of visibility. I'll draw them out. Ghost's prosthetic hand gripped her shoulder. Sarah, this isn't training. This is real bullets, real death. You don't come back from mistakes here. Sarah met his eyes. Colt told me I fight when there's no other choice, when fighting buys the people I love time to survive. This is that moment. So teach me the plan and let me be useful. 5 minutes of rapid coordination followed. Reaper positioned his 3 guards where they could provide suppressing fire. Ghost radioed the Iron Wolves inside, explained the plan, got Colt's furious refusal, followed by Bull overruling him with practical assessment of their situation. Sarah crept toward an exposed position, Ghost's instructions burning in memory. Move fast, stay low. Fire toward their position, but don't expect to hit anything. Survive 30 seconds and we'll pull you back. She reached position, took 3 deep breaths, said silent prayer that Lily would understand if this went wrong, then stood, stepped into moonlight, raised her Glock toward Nevada Viper's concealed positions. Fired 3 shots, the recoil familiar, now muscle memory, executing without thought. Nevada Viper's response was immediate and overwhelming, muzzle flashes erupting from a dozen positions, bullets snapping past Sarah's head close enough to hear. She dropped, rolled, came up behind cover, the way Bull had taught, fired twice more toward different positions. Reaper and his guards opened up with devastating precision, suppressing fire, forcing Nevada Vipers to seek cover instead of maintaining their perimeter. In that window, Iron Wolves moved wounded, being carried, mobile members providing covering fire, the entire group flowing toward vehicles with choreographed efficiency. Sarah kept firing magazine, running dry, fumbling new one from her pocket, hands shaking now that adrenaline was overwhelming training. Bullets chewed through her cover concrete, fragmenting one piece, catching her cheek and drawing blood. Then Ghost was there, dragging her backward, his voice harsh. Move now, they ran stumbling through darkness toward the SUV. Behind them, police sirens grew louder. Nevada Vipers breaking contact rather than face arrest. The window closed, violence ending as suddenly as it had started. At the vehicle's chaos of loading, wounded, counting, heads confirming everyone had made it out. 19 Iron Wolves had entered the rally. 18 were climbing into vehicles now. 1 fatality confirmed, a prospect named Miller who'd taken rounds meant for Colt. Sarah found Colt in the back of a truck, Doc working on his leg wound with grim focus. Colt's face was gray with blood loss, but his eyes tracked to Sarah with laser intensity. You. His voice came out rough. You shouldn't have come. Someone had to. You were dying. Could have been you dying. Could have been you leaving Lily without a mother. But it wasn't. We're here. We're alive. Miller died saving you. Don't make his sacrifice meaningless by dying anyway. Colt managed something that might have been a smile. Bossy, I like that. New side of you. Doc interrupted. Less talking, more bleeding control. You've got maybe an hour before shock sets in. Need to get you to a real hospital. The convoy pulled out, heading north away from Demon's Run and its aftermath. Sarah sat beside Colt, her hand finding his, holding on, while Doc worked and Reaper drove and Ghost coordinated with police who were remarkably willing to accept the official story. Gang violence, self-defense, Iron Wolves were victims, not aggressors. Viper had escaped. Diablo had escaped. But 18 Iron Wolves had survived when they should have died. That was victory, even if it didn't feel like winning. Hospital and Flagstaff took them, treating multiple gunshot wounds and trauma injuries with the weary efficiency of emergency staff who'd seen worse. Colt required surgery for the leg wound, bullet had nicked femoral artery. 2 hours under anesthesia while Sarah sat in the waiting room exhausted and terrified and gradually realizing she'd just participated in a gunfight and survived. Patricia called at midnight, voice tight with controlled panic. Lily knows something happened. Reaper's men told us about casualties. Is my daughter alive? Sarah's voice broke. I'm alive. Colt's in surgery but stable. We're coming home soon. Mom, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have left you. Patricia's response held steel underneath worry. You went to save people who matter to you. That's not something to apologize for. That's something to be proud of. Come home when you can. We'll be here. Colt emerged from surgery at 2 a.m. groggy but a live leg immobilized but intact. Doc had remained at his side throughout old combat medic instincts, refusing to trust civilian surgeons with his brother's life. Sarah stood in the doorway of his recovery room, suddenly uncertain if her presence was welcome now that crisis had passed. Colt's eyes found hers. You saved us. Ghost told me what you did. Drawing fire, buying time for extraction. He paused, searching for words. That was one of the bravest things I've ever seen. And I've seen brave. Sarah moved closer, exhaustion making her honest in ways fear had prevented before. You said I'd fight when there was no other choice. When fighting bought time for people I love to survive. That's what I did, because somewhere in the last month you dangerous men became people I love. Colt's hand found hers, grip, weak but present. We're going to survive this. All of us. Miller's family will be taken care of. Nevada Vipers will face consequences. Diablo and Viper will answer for what they've done. But we survived. That's what matters. 3 weeks later, the world had reorganized itself into something approaching normal. Colt recovered at the compound, physical therapy bringing back mobility. Miller's funeral had drawn hundreds of Iron Wolves paying respect to the young man who'd taken bullets meant for his president. Investigation into Demon's Run had concluded with Nevada Viper's charter being revoked. Diablo facing federal charges. Viper still at large, but now hunted by law enforcement and multiple motorcycle clubs who viewed his actions as violation of sacred codes. Sarah returned to Crossroads Diner, but everything had changed. Jake had promoted her to manager, recognizing that the woman who'd survived what she'd survived deserved authority matching her capability. Iron Wolves members maintained constant presence protection that had become family instead of burden. Patricia's cancer remained in remission, her health improving daily. Lily thrived the trauma processing through therapy, and the resilient healing children managed better than adults. She still called Colt Uncle Wade, still asked to see motorcycles, still trusted that the world contained good people, even when it also contained violence. On a Thursday morning, 6 weeks after Demon's Run, Sarah stood behind the counter at Crossroads, watching familiar motorcycles pull into the parking lot. 5 bikes, Iron Wolves, colors Colt riding, lead despite the slight limp that would probably never fully heal. He entered, touched fingers to forehead toward Martha, nodded at regulars, settled onto his usual stool. Third from left. Same position, same routine. But different now. Forever different. Sarah poured coffee without asking. The usual Colt smiled. You know it. She brought eggs and toast, sat beside him on the adjacent stool, manager privilege, allowing her to pause in her duties. How's the leg getting better? Doc says I'll have full mobility eventually. Just need to be patient. That must be killing you. Colt laughed. It is. But I'm learning. Rebecca used to tell me I needed to slow down, appreciate moments, instead of always planning the next move. Maybe she was right. Outside, Ghost chatted with Bull near the bikes. Through the window, Sarah could see them, laughing brothers at peace. The world still held danger. Viper was still out there. Other threats would emerge. But today, this moment, her family was safe, and the people she'd chosen were alive, and the promises made had been kept. Sarah touched the small Iron Wolves pin on her collar, the medallion Colt had given her after Demon's Run, marking her as family in ways that transcended blood or club membership. Lily wants to learn to ride when she's older, says Uncle Wade promised to teach her. Colt's expression softened. I did. When she's 16. With your permission. And only after she completes the same training you did. No exceptions. Sarah thought about 4 weeks of bruises and exhaustion, about learning to fight and shoot and survive in a world that specialized in breaking people who weren't strong enough. Deal. But you're also teaching her to grow tomatoes. She needs to learn that life isn't just about fighting. It's about nurturing things too. Colt looked at his coffee, emotion flickering across his face. Rebecca would have liked you, would have liked Lily. She always wanted a little sister. She would have loved them. Past tense. Gone but not forgotten. The ghost that shaped everything. I think we would have been friends. I know you would have. Outside, the highway hummed with endless traffic, America moving through this intersection point, unaware of the small dramas played out in roadside diners where ordinary people did extraordinary things. The bell above the door jangled as new customers entered. Life continued. Wounds healed. Promises were kept. Sarah refilled Colt's coffee, caught her reflection in the mirrored backsplash. Not the terrified waitress who'd overheard murder being planned, not the helpless victim who'd needed saving, but someone who'd chosen courage, found family, learned to fight for what mattered, and discovered that honor existed even in the darkest corners of broken worlds. The Crossroads Diner stood at the intersection of Route 66 and County Road 12, where past met future, where danger became safety, where two whispered words had changed everything. And inside, over coffee and eggs and the simple ritual of Thursday morning breakfast, a family forged in violence and sealed in loyalty proved that sometimes the people you choose become the ones who save you. Sometimes courage is whispering warnings to strangers. Sometimes it's learning to fight when everything in you wants to hide. Sometimes it's standing in moonlight, drawing fire so others can escape. Sometimes it's just showing up day after day, keeping promises, growing tomatoes, teaching children that good men exist even when the world suggests otherwise. Sarah Mitchell had wanted safety. What she'd found was family. Not the family she'd imagined, but the family she'd needed. The family that had needed her. The family worth fighting for. And that in the end was everything that mattered.